I was really pleased. There's two education-related bills this week that I've been really pleased with. One is today, Senator Hicks has a bill about certified reading language specialists. So these are folks who can work with kids who have dyslexia. We have a challenge statewide of having educators who have the knowledge to really help kids with dyslexia. We're now screening, but we don't necessarily have the resources to help them, and that's what we need. And so this is a mini micro-credential bill that's going through today. And Senator Mann had a great bill go through that's about how do we help our emergency certified educators become prepared and learn what they need to learn about child development, learn what they need to about curriculum and teaching. So those are two that I'm most proud of.
Speaking of education, you might have heard the State Board of Education meeting got postponed today because of potential Meetings Act violation. But kind of what do you think of these three new board members who seem to be putting or just giving a lot of pushback to Superintendent Walters and this job they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, transparency is absolutely important, and I think we've had a lot of questions over the last couple of years about the superintendent's application of the Open Meetings Act, not always distributing agendas, not always including appropriate public comment, never moving the location to make sure people can access it. Those are huge concerns, and I'm glad there's some board members pushing back on that. That's certainly their responsibility, and I'm glad to see that.
Along the line of the Department of Education, the board has approved these new social studies standards. Does your caucus have some particular concerns there, either with the process or the content of those new standards?
Yeah, we're concerned about the social studies standards, content, and process. First of all, just as the Senate, we should remember that we had the authority to confirm the appointees from the governor to the standards committee. So we had educators come through here. We vetted them very carefully. We approved them, and then their work was ignored. So that's a deep concern that the Senate vetted folks did not actually get their work used. So that's not only a waste of time, but it's also ignoring the people that we approved. Secondly, bringing in outside clearly political voices to write the standards for our children is deeply concerning. I've heard from a lot of educators who were concerned also that the new standards don't really look at the appropriate ages and age development. We have to be real about what kids can learn and at what age, and so that's a big problem. But I think what we see is a deeply political process when we should be looking at what kids need, what's best for kids.
Are there some other bills that the Senate passed that you feel like is going to push the state forward in education?
You know, we've seen some good work. Senator Seyfried worked on math. What do we do for kids who are struggling in math? And I think that's really an effort to match the work we put into literacy. I think my big concern throughout, I voted for it, supported it, but I do think, are we going to put the resources there that's needed to back it up, right? We can't just point out the problem. We also need to make sure we know class sizes and qualified educators are the most important things for success in these areas. So I just don't want us to get distracted by things like cell phones or specific standards when the big problem is not being addressed, which is teacher shortage and our classroom sizes.
Going back to the standards for a moment, have you heard anything from Republican leadership about plans for reviewing them?
Yeah, great. We've been in talks. I would say I've made sure that leadership is cognizant of their authority and their opportunity to reject. I don't know anything more about the process that will be taken. I know the bill could come straight to the floor. I know my caucus has deep concerns, and we're trying to decide what our next steps are. But we're concerned about the clock running out, the 30-day clock, and so we're very vigilant about that. We've been doing a lot of identifying the most problematic parts of the standards, but really right now I think going back to what the educators came up with might be the most straightforward step. And so I think we will be lobbying inside and outside the building about rejecting those standards.
And you could also amend those standards, right?
Correct.
I have a colleague that is wondering specifically about the election denialism, the 2020 election denialism aspect of those standards. Did you have any comments around that? I know you said you were trying not to get caught up in the uber-specific stuff and think about the big picture in education, but it's a conversation being had.
Yes. We absolutely need to always have critical thinking about elections, about public decision making. I think we see a national dialogue that discourages criticism. And I think when we're putting this into the standards about our previous administration, we need to recognize that asking questions about our democracy and our leaders now is the people's right. And they should ask questions, and they have concerns, and they should be able to raise them. So to me, asking questions about a previous election is okay, but to single out one I think is inappropriate. I mean, there are many years that we could be looking at if you want to talk about process. To me, it does bring up that democracy is not as neat as we wish it was. You know, I think back to a real formative election for me was Gore versus Bush. I had no idea how elections ran before that whole process came through. So do I think it could help with civic engagement? Absolutely, but not to focus on one because of political reasons. Yeah.
My colleague Jennifer Palmer had a story today about bonuses at the State Board of Education.
Oh, yeah.
$600,000, including some top policy advisors, got a big one. Do you have any thoughts, feelings about that, especially with the push to block grant federal funds coming in that would be flowing through the State Board of Education?
Yeah, we have current leader shows how challenging the amount of discretion that leader has is. So, you know, agency budgets, there's a lot of discretion for the agency head if it's not line item by us. And I think what we're seeing is the problems with that. And as my colleagues very clearly pointed out in committee, unfilled employee roles at the State Department is funding these political decisions and it's funding those bonuses. So if the superintendent decides not to fill positions, that money is under his discretion, and I feel like the legislature needs to take action on it. The problem is, we don't want to cut his budget, right? So how do we make sure his spending is aligning with what we've told him the intention of the funding is? And I think that's the big challenge we have right now, especially entering the budget negotiations.
Kind of along those lines, one of the bonuses, I think it was $45,000, was to a gentleman who lives in Austin, Texas. And it's, I mean, Governor Stitt did issue a return to work order a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Do you think that should apply to Matt Langston?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say yes, but I'm not supportive of that return to work in general. I mean, I have a lot of state employees in my district who were hired under hybrid or remote work status and then that's been just summarily pulled from them, which I think takes away the autonomy of people who were hired in a certain way. Now, do I think we should have someone in Texas dictating the decision making of our educational system? That concerns me. That's a big problem. And I think, so no. Do I think he should get a bonus? No. No. Have we seen performance that really shows that the outcomes merit a bonus? We haven't seen that.
Changing gears a little bit to the windmill setback
Yeah.
regulations that are being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Just your caucus's positioning on those. I know that some of the distances have been thrown around, quarter mile, half a mile, the distance, the height of the windmill itself.
Yeah.
Where are you guys as a Democratic?
Yeah, we very much want there to be an open conversation about the real issue there. And I think we see a lot of hasty, behind closed doors negotiation. So Senator Bourne has done a lot of work to understand renewable energy and how it relates to our very important oil and gas industry. And her concerns are not being elevated. That's a problem. We want to see her in that conversation because she's taken the time to learn about it. She pointed out that windmills turbines actually vary in size from almost tabletop size to, Devon tower size, and this bill treats them all the same. So I think what we see is a lot of, we need more accountability in those bills. They need to be vetted better, and we need to make sure more people are at the table for that. So that was part of the reason we voted against it. The other is, we do have to focus on property rights. We do not need to pick on wind industry when oil and gas can put literally a derrick right across your fence. And we cannot treat these industries differently like that.
What about regulation on renewables kind of more generally, I guess? I was having a conversation with Representative Eddie Dempsey yesterday about something unrelated, but it came up that he felt that the state is a little bit behind on the setback regulations for things like windmills and solar farms, which are becoming more relevant kind of as the day goes by, hydroelectric plants in southeastern Oklahoma. Is the legislature behind on that regulation?
You mean because we don't have them in place?
Yes.
Yeah, our regulations are not keeping up with innovation, and I don't think we're open to innovation in our regulations. I think we very much have been keeping the status quo of the past structures. So yeah, definitely.
I just had one last question about the state forester. Yesterday the governor addressed talking about how the state forester is out of his job, and I'm still trying to confirm if he resigned or was fired, but obviously there were some fires here in Oklahoma County, and then most of it, though, a lot of concern about Payne and Logan County. So I'm curious, have you heard about the state forester? What are your thoughts on their response to the fires? Because
I haven't, and I apologize for that. Anything else?
Anybody have any other questions? Because I know everybody's slammed.
Hasty? All right, thank you all. I appreciate you very much.